And then Chris Lane will wrap up a rather lengthy report on the Denver Convention, I think, first.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Russ, I'll go ahead and kick it off. Welcome, everybody. I thought 2 weeks ago was going to be my last, Denver convention thing, but this is what they call the encore performance. Was invited to come on and give a wrap up, and I'm really happy to do so. We had a fantastic convention here in Denver. I know many of you in this meeting tonight were there, and I saw you live and in person. I know not everybody was able to come, and those of you who were not able to join us, we missed you, and we hope to see you in the future. But I'll go through facts and figures and tell you all about the convention and some of the things that we did. But let's start off with just the elephant in the room. There has been some reports about people that are became ill, either right at the end of the convention or shortly after leaving. And now, because the interweb is the interweb and things get blown out of proportion, I saw some ridiculous numbers. 100 people got sick or something. And, we have been monitoring this, and I'll give you some confirmed numbers that I have on that. Mike McCarville being one of them, although not COVID. He's a member of a club here in Denver, and several of the people there had flu-like issues after the thing. Nobody's sick, but feeling a little under the weather. But we have about 12 that we can identify, people that have done the testing and confirmed that they had COVID. And we have an additional somewhere on the order of 25 to 30 people that had just felt a little under the weather after the convention, a bad cold, flu-like symptoms. No one has been hospitalized. No one has had to seek medical treatment to the best of our knowledge. Obviously, it's unfortunate that anybody got sick at these things, but this is, for the benefit of those putting on future conventions and those going to future conventions. COVID, unfortunately, is a fact of life. It's not going anywhere. It's never going to go anywhere. That virus has been released, and it's going to be around forever. And so, people need to do what they feel is best to protect themselves. It was never mentioned in our material and everything because we were monitoring the situation here in Denver, and there was no reported cases of COVID anywhere in the area in the weeks leading up to the convention. And in fact, none of the locals have tested positive for COVID, and only a couple of the locals had any of the flu issues. But when we travel, and we literally had people come from all over the world. Had, we believe, 7 or 9 countries come, including a gentleman that I got talking to just via email in Hoover, and nice fella named Gavin. Well, he introduced himself at the convention. He came all the way from Singapore for the sole purpose of attending the narrow gauge convention. And he said he had the time of his life. He can't wait to come back and do it again. And so I gave him a standing invite to come and call me next time he comes to Denver. But the camaraderie was fantastic. Now, the downside of that is we're all coming from different locations, and whatever local bug that we have that we might be fine with might affect someone else more strongly. And I think that's what's going on here. But when I give you the number of people, you'll see that it's a very, very low percentage of people that had any kind of issue on that. When you have small conventions, you might hear of a couple people. Well, we think maybe as many as 30 got sick, but we had 1,166 paid people there at the convention, between wives, vendors, their helpers. That does not include the 20 volunteers who just didn't sign up for anything and just came of their own volition to help us run the convention. So the largest convention in many years, not quite as large as we had in Denver in 2017, but right in the ballpark. And let me give you some other facts and figures. We had 108 clinics presented during the course of those 4 days, 54 separate and distinct clinics given twice. We had 45 layouts on tour, including 3 museums. We also had 10 large modular layouts, including the largest ever modular setup ever by our friends, the Mud Hens from the St. Louis, Chicago, Arizona. As you guys know, they're kind of all over the country anymore. And they brought the largest setup they had ever done to Denver, in addition to the Nebraska Fremo HO3 setup, which was ginormous, and a number of other people. So we were very happy with that. We had 89 vendors that bought tables, and I'll be very clear on this. We did have some vendors that did not come to the convention for whatever reason. Microengineering was busy making track. They were not able to attend. We had one vendor who was ill previous to the convention who decided not to come. And we had two other vendors that had, unfortunately, family emergencies, either a death in the family or some other thing that they were not able to attend. But we had 89 people that bought tables at the show. Our contest room, we had 145 contest entries, of which only 30 of those were photographs. So a stunning number of models. We completely filled a large meeting room there at the hotel. And later in the program, when you guys see the photos, you will be stunned and amazed. The worst model in that convention room was absolutely excellent, and they got better from there, which you'll be able to see for yourself here in a few moments. We also, one thing that we're extremely proud of that we did in Denver, much better than we did in 2017, because it was an area of focus. We had non-rail programs, and we had two rooms that were operating continuously for people that were less interested in the rail activities. One of the room was just a quiet room for reading. They had very comfortable chairs that the hotel brought in. And then we had another room where we had a jewelry making program. We had a program where the ladies were able to put a quilt together, and it was finished, and they were presenting that to youth that had suffered some trauma or people in need. We had, and hopefully those of you who were there saw the legendary Ladies of Colorado. And these ladies are actors who show up and portray Molly Brown and some of the Temperance and just famous ladies of Colorado. And I think the best thing is when they posed in front of, and I'll ruin the surprise for those of you who didn't come, we brought in a replica of Denver, South Park and Pacific 191, a full-size locomotive that was made out of foam and plastic, and it was parked right there in the vendor room. And everybody had a lot of opportunity to take pictures with that. It was really a pretty stunning piece, definitely an attention grabber. And the picture of the legendary ladies in front of it, which I don't have a copy available to me, unfortunately, was pretty nifty, period stuff. I'll talk a minute about the much ballyhooed Whova app. You know I mentioned it time and time again in the time leading up to the convention. Universally, people found that app to be really, really productive, really, really helpful, a great way to contact people, a great way to interact, a great way to develop meetings, and without a doubt, one of the greatest ways to get around to the layouts. I had one gentleman came up to us, and he was so excited. On the first day he did layout tours, he did 8 layout tours in one day. And in Denver traffic, that's absolutely stunning. Well, he turned around and did it again the next day, just by using the apps and the route that Bill had definitely laid out for him. And I've got to start right there, talk about some of the committee members. Bill Lund, who was our layout coordinator, did an absolutely stunning job of picking the layouts, making sure the signage was good, testing and retesting the routing, and then getting all of that programmed into the Whova app. And of course, I did mention for those of us who carry flip phones and have little short triceratops arms, we did have paper maps available for everybody who preferred that method of navigation, and those were available, as was a printed timetable, same as always. But all of that information, plus a whole lot more, was contained on the Whova app. And when we later encountered some issues with the hotel elevators, we were able to keep everybody up to date in real time as to what the problem was with the elevators, when we expected the tech to show up, when the tech did show up, and when the elevators were repaired a couple hours later. It proved to be a really stunning resource. I'm going to say for people going ahead, it's something that you should really look into. I'll next mention Mike Conder, who was our registrar, who used the Whova app much to our advantage. Every number I give you is programmed into the machine. We know exactly how many people were there. We know exactly how many vendors, exactly how many volunteers we had, because that information was all contained in there. It made giving refunds when we needed to do that so much easier. And for those of you, remember when you showed up, you were in the system, you waved your badge in front of us or your smartphone, you were checked in and you were good to go. There was no big pileup in the check-in process as there's occasionally been in the past. So we're very happy with that implementation. We felt like that worked particularly well in a lot of respects. Maria Gabrielson was in charge of our non-rail program, did a fantastic job. Duncan Harvey was our coordinator for our clinics. And as usual, we had a few people drop out at the last minute, but we had people in the system. It was no big deal. We let everybody know via Whova that we've had a change in the clinic. The next presenter stepped up, did their presentation, and it was absolutely seamless for the convention goers. So big props to Duncan to having a bench that deep, 54 clinics, and having alternate clinics in case somebody was not able to make it. And we ended up using, I think, 2 of our bench alternative clinics. What else do I want to tell you about? We had 60,000 square feet of both vendor and modular space. So the convention center at this place was really great and really suited our needs well. The hotel, as we joked about before the thing, the hotel needs a little renovation. It was getting a little elderly. We had one working elevator, which we were quite surprised when we showed up to start setting up. And, that elevator didn't function for a couple hours on one day. So that was not ideal. And like every place, they were understaffed. They worked their butts off. They tried very hard. I think the staff was universally pretty polite, pretty helpful, but there just wasn't enough of them. So getting dinner and drinks was a little bit problematic a couple nights. But as I mentioned, at the beginning, we had over 1,000 hotel rooms within half a mile of this particular hotel. So those who didn't stay there had easy access, free parking, no big deal for them. And Denver is loaded with great restaurants and bars. And there was plenty of places, again, within less than a half a mile that people could go to. So all in all, we're very pleased. And we're very pleased at the awards presentation. We made a bid for 2028 and we won that bid. So if you had a good time in Denver, come on back and see us in 5 years. And if you missed out for some reason, well, you're getting another chance. Take your vitamins, make sure you're good to go, get ready for the Rocky Mountain altitude, and come and see us in 5 years. And I'll kick up the chat, just see if there's any questions anybody particularly has for me, or I can certainly, if we can do it in some kind of organized manner, I'll be happy to take questions that anybody has on anything that I didn't cover. We've got some time, so that's completely at Robin and Pete and everybody's discretion there. Russ, you tell me how you want to handle that, but I'm happy to take questions or happy to address anything that I forgot to mention.
Chris, may I suggest that we go through Dave and Dan are going to talk about the convention. We're going to go through a slideshow, and at the end of that, there might be some questions, like some of the
Perfect.
contest winners. Let's do that and wait until the end.
Okay, that works for me. Perfect. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. I'll roll the slideshow that's going to show, which can go in the background, while I think Dave and Dan are going to speak about their experiences. So
okay. Let me do
now.
a brief introduction to Dan. Dan, this was his 3rd National Narrow Gauge Convention, but it was his first time as a clinic presenter. And so he's going to be able to bring a perspective of somebody that's relatively new to the National Narrow Gauge Convention. And it's going to be interesting just simply because Dan is also a professional railroader, and he's also a live steamer, and he's models an HON3. So, I mean, we've got an individual here that covers everything from small to large. And I did sit on his clinic, and I thought it was really nice. So Dan, if you want to let us know what you thought was really cool about the convention, what you learned about attending and participating since your first one, and what it's like to be a first-time presenter, and any other thing you care to add, let's go.
I thought the Denver convention was among one of the best of the three I have attended by far. It was very well put on. Much props goes to you, Chris, and everybody else involved. I had a great time. I'm sure everybody else did too. My first convention was when it was here in the Twin Cities in 2018. I went to Sacramento the following year and I visited Dave's layout as part of that, and I really enjoyed that. Beyond that, I started building a URA branch layout last December, and I figured with a little bit of pushing from a couple of friends of mine that I would do a clinic on that at the narrow gauge convention this year. And I had a great time putting it together. I had a great time putting it on. It really gave me a little bit of insight into how long it's been since I've done any kind of public speaking. But I had a great time doing it, and I've got a lot of really nice comments from a lot of really nice people that attended my clinic and really enjoyed it. So I thank everybody for attending the clinic if you did. And if you didn't, well, you guys can get in touch with me, and I got a Facebook page about my layout. Do I see more narrow gauge conventions in my future? Absolutely. 2026 for sure. I'm planning to have my layout open for the layout tours for that. And as far as the convention otherwise goes, I mean, yeah, I just had a great time. I'm sure everybody else did too. So anything else you want me to talk about, Dave?
Well, anything you want to, Dan. You might say is, how much did you buy on the vendors hall?
Not as much as I would have thought. Narrowing my focus down to the URA branch kind of has narrowed down my focus on buying things. So that's been a definite help. But no, the vendors hall was great. The modular layouts are great. I really enjoyed seeing the Mud Hens layout, the largest one they've ever had. That was really nice to see. And then the pre-convention activities too were a lot of fun. I attended the Silverton Mix charter, the Durango and Silverton, and the Friends charter, the Cumbres and Toltec. And there were a little bit of issues one day of the Friends charter, the CNTS, but I boil it down just to mountain railroading. As a railroader myself, I know how things go. So you can't have a good day on the railroad every day. So, and for those of you who weren't there, the issue with the second day of the Friends charter was the 315 was a little bit over tonnage, and the sand wasn't getting down to the rail, so she was having a little bit of trouble that day.
Well, thanks, Dan. If there's anything else that you want to contribute, feel free to do that. If not, then we'll go ahead and I'll introduce Gerry Cornwell, who really needs no introduction, having been part of this this merry little band on the NNG since its inception here. But I will add that we picked Gerry to be the guy that's been to a lot of conventions to provide his perspective. In fact, Gerry allowed that he's been to over 36 of these national narrow gauge conventions, and so that's quite a number. I noticed this year was probably the first year that say Chris or whoever was heading up the convention didn't ask for a show of hands, starting with how many people have attended all national narrow gauge conventions. So I think that what that does is say our ranks, unfortunately, are starting to thin here after 43 years. So I think that that tradition is something that we would probably want to revive at the future conventions. Well, let's see, Gerry, what did you think was cool about this convention? Why have you attended so many of them? And has your motivation for attending conventions changed over the years? And lastly, do you have more fun as a clinician or as a vendor?
Well, that's a good question. I haven't decided yet. I think the answer to your question, Dave, is yes. So as Dave said, I've attended most of them since '83 was the first one I attended. So I totaled 36 so far, which is 84% of the conventions. I started in the 80s as a new narrow gauger. I was an HO standard gauge, and I went to narrow gauge because I met some extremely nasty people in Toronto who I'm still hanging around with 40 years later. And they dragged me into the kicking and screaming into the narrow gauge world. When I got involved with Mount Albert scale lumber in the 90s, I started attending as a vendor, and that gave me a different perspective. It was interesting because I wasn't just going for my own enjoyment and for fun. I was actually going because I had a business to manage and to promote. So it became an interesting shift in my approach to the conventions and the way I thought about them. I started thinking much more about the cost and how it applied to what our payback was in terms of sales, that kind of thing. So it does change your perspective, certainly. I wouldn't say it's less enjoyable. I think being a vendor at a convention is fun. I get to meet my customers in person. So that's one side of it. The other side is doing clinics, and I agree with Dan. I think doing clinics really, once again, opens your eyes more. It enables you to help people, which is fun. I've done a lot of teaching in my life, and as a lighting designer, pretty much all lighting designers end up doing a certain amount of teaching. Because it's a subject that everybody pretends they know about and nobody does. So I've done clinics on layout lighting, working with wood, of course, and also I used to be the PFM service guy in Canada. So I also did a couple of clinics on maintaining the PFM sound systems, which was fun. I seem to recall one in which I terrified Charlie Getz by taking a PFM system apart in front of him and held up with the cables and things all dangling down. he said, "I'm going to run screaming from the room now." So when I was involved with Mount Albert, I became we became an annual sponsor of the conventions, and we also give an annual award, and we've continued that tradition also in Denver, and we'll plan to continue that. What I thought was neat about this convention was a couple things. One is Colorado. I mean, it's the heart of narrow gauge, really, in North America, and particularly Western narrow gauge. This was our 13th Colorado convention, which is 30% of the conventions have been in Colorado, which is pretty amazing. I think the best part for me in this convention was the contest room. Probably one of the best I've ever seen. Not only the quantity, but also the quality. There was a very broad range of subjects. This photograph, by the way, you're looking at, I think that is spectacular. There was a very broad range of subjects. There were some really inspired animations and really great presentation. This model here, we gave the Mount Albert Award to. It had an operating a belt drive system, which was, amazing, really. Something that's only a fairly recent addition to the conventions is the idea of animation in our models, and it's really exceptional. And the room was well lit for a change. Quite often the contest rooms suffer from really poor lighting, and you can't really see the models well. And this room was an exception in that it was reasonably well lit. Another thing that I really enjoyed, I was involved with our group in Toronto with modules for several years, and some of you may have seen our Dolores modules. The last time we showed those was at Minneapolis. And we won first prize for the modules at that time. We've since sold those modules. But it's really, I'm now fascinated by modules, and I want to see how people do them. And I saw some really intriguing and interesting approaches to, for example, adjustable legs at the convention. And the other thing that I saw that really interested me was the fact we had quite a lot of young people running trains on the modules, which is really great to see and unusual. It's really nice to see people that aren't using walkers to get around at the convention, and it's a nice change. So, and it's really a note to all of us to encourage our younger relatives, grandchildren, whatever, to get engaged in the hobby. It's really nice to meet Dan at the convention and see somebody younger at last that's fascinated by this interesting hobby. The convention committee was really easy to deal with and helpful at all times. I had no problems with anybody. Everybody was really keen to help us and sort problems out for us and that kind of thing. The conventions for me became really the best way to maintain relationships with our with Mount Albert's biggest customers, the kit manufacturers, and so many of these turned into long-term friendships, including, of course, the late Roger Malinowski. We had it was interesting at the convention to see that he received a fellow of the can't remember the name of it now. Somebody help me here. Received an award from Jimmy
Hall of Fame.
Is it?
Thank you, the Narrow Gauge Hall of Fame. Yeah, that slipped out of my mind there for a moment. Now that Fast Tracks owns Mount Albert, my role has changed somewhat, and I now represent the Fast Track product lines at the conventions. Tim Warris at Fast Tracks doesn't really like doing conventions very much, so he'd much rather be in the shop amending things and fixing things and coming up with new ideas. So it's a good opportunity for us to test the waters with new products and introduce kits and various other things that we're doing. So Dave asked if I enjoy being a vendor or a clinician more. And as I said, only half joking, the answer is yes. So both those roles I found have their ups and their downs. Being a vendor is great because I really get to meet my customers in person instead of by email. And that is, much more rewarding, I think. You get to meet the person and really see and understand the person, which is great. The hours are long. And I understand that in Pittsburgh next year, they're going to actually change the schedule to make it a little less onerous on us older guys who have businesses to attend to. The 12 and 14-hour days are getting outside of my skill set. So it's nice to see we'll be doing a more normal daytime hours. It'll be interesting to see how that works out too. And in terms of doing clinics, as Dan noted, it's a lot of work. I mean, you've really got to be prepped, and you've got to have all of your stuff, and you've got to have your props, and you've got to have photographs if you're using them, all that kind of stuff you have to go through. But on the other hand, you get to help someone discover a new technique or a new skill, which is always rewarding. So to wrap up, the only disappointment for me on this trip was I also didn't get COVID, but I got a really bad head cold. I think I got it on the plane because I had symptoms on late Thursday, early Friday. So 3 days, typical gestation for a bug like that. So our rest of our trip was canceled, though. So we didn't get to go down to Durango and Chama and Santa Fe. So next time. I am looking forward to meeting some of you in person in Pittsburgh, and I really enjoyed meeting the people who were at Denver a week ago. So thanks. See you again.
Well, thank you, Gerry. I think at this point, Dan, I'll give you another shot if you've got anything else you'd like to contribute.
I just want to reiterate something Gerry said about the younger folks at the convention. I thought it was great to see so many other younger folks at the convention too. It was really nice to see, and that was one thing that Gerry brought up that I thought was great too. So
I sure support that. One of the things that I was really pleased with, one of the engineers off the DNS attended the convention, and he brought his 5-year-old son with him.
Yep.
And they
John
just
Cox.
had a great
Yep.
time. Yeah, that was just super. So all the concern about the hobby is dying is if you attended the convention or you hit the Durango and Silverton or the Cumbers and Toltec, is there's a lot of young people involved in this in this railroad hobby, if you will, in the larger sense. So I think overall it was a great convention. I'm certainly glad I attended, and I enjoyed every minute, even though one day I was so worn out, I didn't go layout touring and I had to take a nap instead. But it was absolutely wonderful.
If I could make a couple points on the young people, Dave.
Yeah.
If you attended 2017, hopefully you noticed that we had a pretty decent amount of young people, and we solicited them again. We worked very hard to bring younger narrow gauge modelers in, and let me relate a personal story, and so you can understand why. The one of the first conventions here in Denver, 1977, I actually attended that as a 17-year-old high school kid. And I mean, I was really welcomed in by the fraternity. Everybody, of course, called me the kid because I was back then. And, you know, I looked around the room during the awards thing, and you know, on some levels, I'm still the kid at 61. But I mean, I've joked, but the fact of the matter is we do need those young people in, and we didn't advertise it or anything, but anyone that someone who registered wanted to bring under the age of 18, we let them in absolutely free for that reason. Because again, I'm hoping that a couple of these young guys are future me's and future you's and future other, you know, leaders or prominent people in the narrow gauge things, because that's how it perpetuates. So we felt very strongly about bringing young people in. And we also felt very strongly about, you know, any women that were railroaders that attended, making sure that they were treated as, I hate to use the expression, but one of the boys, just that there was no difference there. And as if you looked around carefully, which I did as one of the organizers, we had a seriously diverse group of attendees. We had all kinds of nationalities, all kinds of colors, all kinds of genders, everything. You know, we were a good slice of society, which is what we'd hoped to be, all brought together by our common love of railroading and specifically narrow gauge railroading. So in that respect, I'm really proud of what we were able to do as a group. I forgot, and I put it in the direct messages, or excuse me, in the chat, but I forgot to mention Dwayne Richardson as one of the committee members, and shame on me. Dwayne Richardson killed himself putting together that great contest room that you saw, and his volunteers were there until the wee hours, counting up. If you have 1,066 people in there, that's a whole lot of ballots, and they were counting them manually. And yeah, we delivered pizza and everything. I appreciate that Gerry noticed the good lighting in there. We specifically asked the hotel, as they were upgrading lighting, we said, that is our contest room. Get the new lights in there as soon as you can. And they did. They got them in there about 4 months before the convention, and it made a big difference. Lighting is critical in the contest room, and we were very pleased with the table height, which allows people to see the models up close without sticking their giant caboose out in the aisle, bending over, and putting them a little closer to eye level, and putting them, honestly, you know, Gerry knows lumens drop off in distance. So being, you know, 18 inches closer to the lights makes the lighting just that much better. I'm going to look in the chat real quick and see. I didn't notice any questions. I don't know if anybody has any that has come up while we were talking about things. I guess I'll say one final thing about, you know, COVID and the viruses. Unfortunately, if you travel on an airplane, man, I don't think United has cleaned any of their airplanes since the 60s. I mean, I never get sick. And I'll just tell you that point blank. I never get sick unless I fly United, in which case I always end up with a sniffle. And, you know, I'm really, it's unfortunate that anybody got ill at our convention, and that anybody gets ill going to any of these things. You know, we certainly did what we could to minimize that. Part of it is, you know, as we get older, we have to make sure that we take good care of ourselves. Whenever I know I'm traveling, I up my zinc intake, which is high anyway. I up my vitamin D intake and vitamin C, which is high anyway, to give myself the best opportunity to fend off things. And during the course of the convention, I shook approximately 400 sets of hands, maybe more. Of course, I wash my hands frequently, but, you know, if anybody was going to get sick, it should have been me. And I was very fortunate that I didn't end up with anything, and none of our committee members got sick. So, you know, again, for those who did get ill, we are really sorry about that. And we hope you recover quickly, and it's just minor. But going forward in conventions, it's something that we just all have to be aware of. It's a fact of life, and, you know, do what you feel is best to protect yourself when you go to these events.
Chris, I just want to compliment the lady that set up the 2 rooms for the wives. She did a fantastic job, and my wife really enjoyed it.
I will pass that on to Maria. Yeah, I agree with you. She was a godsend. She introduced herself. She's local. She lives down in Parker, but they attend the convention. She introduced herself in Tacoma and said, would you guys like some help with your non-rail program? At which point I threw myself at her feet and said, yes, please, whatever you can do. And she turned out to be a dynamo and just a fantastic addition to the committee.